Well, it says we're live. Hello, everyone. It's Tuesday. It's 4 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock here in Costa Rica, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, midnight in Ireland, 1 a.m. Wednesday morning in Italy, 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. in Australia, and it's Facebook Live. Hello, hello. Really nice to be with you all, and I look forward to these every week. You know why? Because there's no structure and I can be as goofy as I want, which makes it fun. And today we have a very special guest, Mindy Gurman Plutzer, Mindy Gurman Plutzer. And I had the privilege of being interviewed for Mindy's summit that is going on now. It just launched yesterday. This interview was maybe a month ago or so. And we had so much fun. I just said, Mindy, we need to do a Facebook Live so we can do this once again. And so here we are. And so Mindy, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you. You know, you're the perfect partner to help me share my message of hope and healing, that there's a better way to approach recovery.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And this is a topic that is critically important for many of us or people in our family, because we don't know what to do when we know that we're not eating the way that we want to. And we make resolutions, not just at New Year's, but we make the declaration, I'm going to do better. And then we fall on our face again and again. So Mindy, what was it that motivated you to put this event together?
Well, it was my personal experience with recovery and my clinical experience over 25 years working with people who were seeking to transform their relationship with food. And what I came to understand is that people have a relationship with food that is fear-based, that is driven by the need to self-soothe. And it's very important for people to understand that if they are struggling with a disordered relationship with food, a dysfunctional relationship with food, one that is fear-based, certainly based in confusion, and we can talk about the culture that's out there today that is driving that confusion, that's not the problem. The relationship with food, the need to self-soothe, starts out as a brilliant solution. And being that food is our first introduction to being seen, heard, and nurtured, we turn to food very often when we need to self-soothe.
Now, most people won't know what you mean by that, so I want to come back to that. But before I do, I have to say a couple of hellos here. We've got Dorada in New York City. Dorada, well, that's great. Mindy's in New York City, so a fellow New Yorker. Kay's in Arizona. Teresa's Boynton Beach, Florida. Mariana's Chicago. Sandy's in Dallas, Georgia. Dallas, Georgia, okay. Karen's in Springfield. Kelly's here from Indiana. Becky's here from British Columbia. Steph's here from Missouri, and the list goes on and on. Let us know that you're out there, where you're from. It kind of tickles me, you know, when I see these little comments. And by the way, feel free to start posting your questions in the chat room, and we will be happy to answer them. So, Mindy, let's go back to that statement you made about food. Food is our first validation, did you say?
It's our first experience with being seen, heard, and nurtured. You know, as soon as we're born, we cry out of hunger, and we are fed, you know, and we're cuddled, and we're touched, and we get all that oxytocin, and those memories live deep within us. And as we get older, very often the messages that we receive about food become skewed. We could receive different messages, and certain messages are interpreted differently by each one of us. And that's basically what drives our behaviors and how we
look at I have to admit, so often in my life, I will chow down, or as a teenager, I used to do a dozen sliders, which are the hamburgers from White Castle. Just let those grease burgers slide down there, right? And then some French fries and a milkshake or something, just because I was upset or I was confused. Often in my life, I have tried to address my emotional upset or I don't want to eat. I've never thought about this before, but I don't really want to eat bad food when I'm happy. I don't think about eating bad food when I'm happy. How about you guys? I mean, aren't there times when if you look back, or maybe it was yesterday or maybe this morning, but you eat something that, I really shouldn't eat that, but you're upset. And so somehow, Mindy, what's the mechanism? How come we're attracted to that which is not good for us when we're not happy with the way our life is in the moment?
I couldn't be happier that you brought that up, because I just today finished writing a class that I teach, and this week's subject is going to be good food, bad food. And we as a society need to take the morality away from food. Food is essentially neutral. Yes, there are foods that are more beneficial to our health. There are foods that agree with us in a way that makes us feel best, and foods that don't make us feel best. And you and I can have a whole discussion about that as it relates to gut health and physiology. But emotionally, the moral judgment that we place on food is really metaphoric for the moral judgment that we're placing on ourselves and our behavior. And very often we'll turn to foods that are not the best choices for our health when we're feeling that our life is upside down. I truly believe that how we do one thing is how we do everything.
Perfect.
And our relationship to ourselves is reflected in our relationship to everything else, food being one of those paramount relationships.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. Maggie's here from Cleveland, JC from Pennsylvania, Cheryl in Roseboro, North Carolina. Anne's here from Ireland. Chris is in Austin. Dana's in South Surrey, British Columbia. Thanks, Dana, for your comment. Brenda's in Kentucky. Michelle's in Dallas. So they're all over. Natasha's in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Hello, Natasha. Kim's here. I can always crave sweets, but I have less willpower when I'm stressed or unhappy. Amen, Kim. That's the same thing that I find is true for myself.
Yeah, and there's something physiological about that too. The high sugar, high fat processed foods actually have an effect on our brain chemistry. And when we are seeking calm, when we're seeking serenity, we're going to reach for those foods because in the moment, they actually do make us feel better. That's not to say that a hearty dose of guilt and shame follows. That's not to say that we're going to feel discomfort physiologically, but in the moment, that's where we need to go. And very often we're reaching for those foods in an effort to numb, distract, and avoid from feelings and situations that we deem uncomfortable or sometimes intolerable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that I want to numb out sometimes. I want to eat a big bowl of popcorn and just watch a movie. I don't want to feel anything. I don't want to think about anything. And can you imagine, the stomach is the size of your fist. It's some of the most elastic tissue in the body, meaning that it stretches when you eat a big meal, but it's the size of your fist. Now imagine, just stand there somewhere at the movie theater in the hall and watch the people walking by and what they're carrying with them that they're going to sit down and eat in there. Jumbo buckets, buckets that will stretch your stomach out 3 times. You'll look like Marzi looks right now. And she's almost 6 months pregnant, right? And we often do that to ourselves. We often do. When we want to numb out, I don't want to feel, I don't want to be in this mental state anymore. So I'm going to do sugar. 5 months pregnant. Margie just stuck her head in and said, 5, not 6. So we all do that. I think that's part of the human experience. I don't think it's a part that we necessarily like about our actions. I don't really like when I do that. Now, maybe once every 2 weeks, Marzi and I will have a bowl of popcorn because I've got it down. I know how to do popcorn now. And we both love it when we eat it. We'll watch a movie every couple of weeks, but it's not to numb out. It's actually to share an adventure together.
Yeah, right? I wanted to make a point about that, because even a person that has a healthy relationship with food will occasionally eat beyond the point of fullness just because it tastes good. Or maybe there's a wonderful memory of a beloved grandmother or a holiday tradition. That's not a disordered behavior. That doesn't constitute an eating disorder, a disordered relationship with food. I am a huge proponent of bringing emotion to the table with us. It's when we eat in an effort not to feel emotion that it becomes a problem and it becomes consequential.
Yes. Yes. Bringing emotions to the table, that's really a nice phrase. And I went to a play one time in Chicago, and it was called The Dining Room Table. And the entire play was about what happened to a family around the dining room table from the time when the baby was born and all these things are on the table, the diapers, and you're changing diapers on the table, to having an intimate moment with your spouse on the dining room table, to holiday meals, to kids doing homework, that it really is an heirloom of the family. It's a history of the family at the dining room table that occurs. And when I moved from San Diego to Italy, I didn't take my dining room table, but I gave it to my son, and almost like a ritual in giving it to him, because he understood. And I had a really nice dining room table that came from India, of old wood, handmade, no nails, no glue. It was a very cool table. And I'd wax it. I'd take the electric drill and put a waxing thing on the end of it before holiday meals, and had this wax, and I'd all through it. But it's an heirloom. And why is it an heirloom? Because it records in your mind the intimacy that occurs around the table of you and your family. So bringing your emotions to the table is not a bad thing. It's where you share joy and happiness and struggles that you work through together. I'm really a strong proponent of investing in a good dining room table that you'll feel proud to have for decades. But with that little offshoot, let's get back on track, and let's talk about your summit for a moment, and some of the guests that you have on your summit, which started yesterday, by the way, everyone. And we're posting the link here for you so you can register and play catch up. And yesterday's airing is done, but there will be a weekend where all of the days will be aired. So you'll be able to catch up with day one when it airs again after the entire event is over. Who are some of the guests, and what are some of the experiences that you had doing the interviews for these people?
It's been the most incredible experience for me personally and professionally. Day one was all about introducing a functional medicine approach to recovery. And I really hope we get to talk about that and why I felt it's so necessary to introduce that, to marry the concept of functional medicine and functional medicine nutrition to eating disorder recovery. Day two today is all about the hero's journey. Fabulous women who have turned their pain into passion, who are recovered, who have experienced all different levels of disordered eating and healing, and have taken that pain and the lessons from it and turned it into certainly paying it forward with their life's purpose. We have a day devoted to eating psychology. Who are you as an eater? We have a day devoted to mindset. We have a day devoted to relationships, because as I said before, your relationship with yourself reflects itself in every other relationship you have. And then we have a day just devoted to tools, strategies and tools that you can adopt that will help you find your way to healing. So who are my speakers? Well, Dr. Tom, you were so gracious to appear with me, and I truly enjoyed our conversation. Andrea Nakayama, who is the founder of the Functional Nutrition Lab and the Functional Nutrition Alliance, a teacher and a mentor of mine. We have Dr. Lauren Lax, we have Dr. Mary Clifton, we have Jody Cohen, we have Roseanne Capana-Hodge, we have Deborah Wayne. Oh my goodness, it's escaping me now. Dr. Christina Bjorndal. Help me here.
Well,
Danny
we'll
Williamson. I hope that our viewers and our listeners register. It's really an epic event, and it's never been done before. This is truly an unconventional approach to help you say goodbye to your disordered eating. And it's for the person who is even wondering if his or her relationship with food is disordered. I ask the question, do you feel that your relationship with food is holding you hostage? Do you think about food all the time? Do you think that once your relationship with food improves, your life will improve? So even if you're just toying with those ideas, this summit is for you. You're going to leave with more answers than questions.
I was thinking about that as you were speaking, that we all are now inundated with summits. It is the new mechanism for people to carry messages out and reach more. And we have to be selective as to where we put our attention. And everyone out there, you can be assured that if I'm talking to them, they're quality people and they did a quality event. And so when you register, you may watch one day for an hour, for a half hour. You may say, oh, tomorrow this is okay, I want to hear that topic. You don't have to watch the whole thing on any of these summits. We're all developing our skill set as how to work with the summits that are available. What do we allow in terms of information to come in? And this is such a major topic of concern in my world. You all know that I talk about there are 4 sides to the pyramid of health. Any issue you're looking at, we have to look at it from 4 different lenses: the lens of structural problems, the lens of biochemical problems, the lens of emotional or spiritual problems, and the lens of electromagnetic. That we have to look at all of them because they can contribute. And what we're looking at here primarily is the spiritual or emotional side of the pyramid of health and how that may affect our health and well-being down the road. What you eat and how you eat it is so critically important. You want an example? Take a bite of a dish of food, let's say a rice dish, and chew it 30 times. Count 30 times chewing that bite of food. Notice what happens to the taste when you chew 30 times, because your saliva is loaded with enzymes that start to break down starches. That was a foundational concept in an approach to eating called macrobiotics. And the macrobiotic approach to eating is not something I recommend to everyone ever. It's a very focused type of eating that has worked for many people when they have severe degenerative diseases or cancers. But one of the principles in macrobiotics was chew each bite 30 times. You know what happens? You never overeat. Never. Why? Because your jaw gets tired, but also the digestive enzymes, you get that you digest more of your food, you recognize more of the food is there, and you don't overeat, because that feeling of being saturated, satiated, comes much quicker when you're chewing. When I'm upset, I don't chew, I shovel. I shovel. I'll take a forkful of food, I might do 3 or 4 chews, dum, 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 and down it goes. And then I want the next one. And when I catch myself doing that, I know that I'm trying to suppress something. And when I recognize it, I pause. I try to pause and take a deep breath and internally say, what's going on?
Yeah.
So when I'm shoveling, that's a message to me, something's cooking inside here that I need to take a look at. Mindy, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, you bring up so many points that I'd love to comment on. The issue that most people have who are struggling with a disordered or dysfunctional relationship with food is that they're disconnected from the wisdom of their bodies. They're all in their heads. They're living in shouldn't, black and white, good food, bad food, and in that sphere of judgment. That if I'm eating bad food, I'm a bad person. And I think it's really important to recognize what you're talking about as being fundamental to healing one's relationship with food. Because when we can bring that mindfulness to the table that comes from that chewing exercise and that experience, then we're engaging all our senses. And what people need to understand is that digestion really starts in the head with something called the cephalic phase digestive response. And when we allow our senses to be involved, when we make eating about the experience, then it becomes a full body experience and we can stop when we've had enough.
There's a interesting comment here from Amal. She says, every single client I've worked with who has a diagnosed eating disorder from a medical doctor has extremely high levels of toxic copper in their hair tissue mineral analysis. Copper affects the appetite center in the brain, one piece of a larger puzzle. Thank you, Amal, for sharing that. Copper toxicity is also a very common symptom in people with wheat-related disorders. There's a couple of papers published on that. And I'm not sure of the correlation with eating. Mindy, do you have any knowledge on that topic of copper?
No, not copper, but I know copper and zinc have some kind of symbiotic relationship, correct?
Right, right, that's true.
Right, and very often zinc is deficient in those who have restrictive eating disorders and have hunger dysregulation. So I'd really love to learn more about that. But again, here we're going to the physiology that is driving disordered eating behaviors. And that's why it was so important for me to do this summit and to invite you, Dr. Tom, because I believe it is so important for people struggling with eating disorders, disordered eating behaviors, to know that it's not all in their heads. There is a huge physiological, biological component. And when we can embrace that, and when we can understand that there is that biological component, we become empowered when we believe we're not broken. We become empowered when we're working with a practitioner who wants to enter into a therapeutic partnership. And I love this question because it brings us to this whole area of discussion that this physiological component, this biological component is so huge.
Well, that's a really good comment. And first off, you're absolutely right about zinc. You develop copper toxicity when you have low levels of zinc.
Okay.
And zinc is critically important in producing your digestive enzymes. From hydrochloric acid to the pancreatic enzymes, zinc is a critical component in the process of producing those enzymes. So if you have a zinc insufficiency or a zinc deficiency, you're not making enough digestive enzymes, you aren't going to get the nutrients out of your food, you're going to crave more food. that's one of the biochemical mechanisms behind eating disorders. There's a couple of comments here. Gwendolyn says, I was very sick as a child and as a result was overweight. Food became the enemy. And as a result, I developed a lot of shame around eating. Well, Gwendolyn, the first thing I want to say is high five to you, girl. Come on, come on, high five. Way to go, that you recognize this. You can't fix something that you don't recognize, right? You have to recognize it. And, you know, we all have dynamics that we would like to see different. So and you didn't have a choice when you were a child. You didn't have the skill set that you have now. And one of the things that happens to us is when we feel threatened, which is what stress is, we get stressed when we're threatened. If it's an emotional stress, we revert back to how we learn to survive when dealing with that kind of stress. And we learn to survive as a child. And so we revert back to some of those childish responses, not knowingly, but that's what we do. And when you do the work that you learn about in Mindy's event, when you start to understand this a little more, you start thinking like an adult, because you've got tools now as an adult you didn't have when you were a kid. And I still have reactions many times to stress that comes in. Now, what's wrong with that, Dr. Tom? Well, there's a huge difference between having a reaction to reacting to something and having a response. A reaction is an automatic. From past history, I know I'll survive if I react this way. A response is a conscious choice of how to respond to a situation. A reaction is automatic. It's survival. A response is conscious choice. So if you want to build a bicep muscle, you have to work your biceps. If you want to develop your adult response muscles to the stress of life, you have to work your adult response muscles, right? You have to practice. You have to learn some of the exercises that I'm sure you talk about in your event, ways of looking at things. Would you like to comment on that?
You know, this what we're talking about now brings me back to your dining room table, because it's all about the story. It's all about how we interpreted what we needed to do to survive the situations. And that brings us back to what I talked about when we first started our discussion tonight about self-soothing. And very often we're given messages at that dining room table that we interpret in such a way that don't serve us well as we get older. So, you know, part of the unfolding of all of this is to look at the parts of the story that are no longer serving us and reframe them to know that our story will always be our story. It's worth honoring, but we can turn the page and then, like I say, start writing what becomes our happily ever after. Yeah. So, and again, sweet. You're talking about responding, not reacting. You know, it's learning how to manage the triggers. There will always be triggers. We know that. Life is right. Triggering. Life in itself is triggering. And oh, heaven only knows that what we're surrounded with now in our world is certainly triggering. We have to know how to respond. We can't change the situation, but we can change our relationship to it.
That's a really good point. You know, I often say, that's a bumper sticker, you know, and I was thinking as you were talking, yeah, life sucks. And so I just had the bumper stick, life sucks, period. Get a straw. You know, learn how to respond right. Instead of always reacting, and life changes. It really does change.
Yeah.
Let me give a shout out here. Maria's here from Ireland. Hello, Maria. Michelle says, oh my God, I have high copper. So I'm always hungry. Should I test for toxins? I did show wheat sensitivity on the Zoomer test. Well, Michelle, first thing to recognize is if you have a wheat-related disorder, your microbiome is going to be out of balance. So go back to one of my earlier Facebooks on how to rebuild a healthy microbiome, right? And one of the tests that you can do is called SpectraCell that looks at levels of many different nutrients. So you can find out if you have low zinc. You said that you have high copper, but do you have low zinc? Could that be a component of that? Gwendolyn says, oh, yeah, no, I already read that one from Gwendolyn. There was one comment that I saw earlier and then it got pushed up. Brenda's here from Northern Kentucky. That's, oh no, Kat. Kat says, hi, Brenda, I'm here from Northern Kentucky. And Kat says, my first picture in my baby book back 61 years ago was a buffet table of food. That began my 50-year battle with food. Okay, Kat. Well, glad that, if it's a 50-year battle and you're 61, that means 11 years ago, you won the battle. So congratulations on that. Donnie says, the summit is amazing. Great job, Mindy Gorman Plutzer.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Brenda's here from Campbellsville. Cheryl says, I overeat to numb my mental pain, but consciously aware it's hurting me. Then the guilt afterwards is horrible. Once again, Cheryl, for you, congratulations. Congratulations for recognizing the dynamic that you developed to survive. This is how you survived as a kid. And we go back to those survival mechanisms. So bully for you for recognizing it. Now you want to respond. And it may be 1 time out of 10 that you're going to respond the way you want to. Next month, it'll be 2 times out of 10. The month after that, it's 3 times out of 10. So as you acknowledge the wins and you recognize, hey, I did my best here, and it's better than it was a month ago. When you are kind to yourself that way, you keep accumulating the benefits of the wins. And eventually the wins become more often than the not wins. And now you're responding more often instead of reacting. And it may take you 2 years to dial this thing down. It may take you a while. I mean, who cares? You know, we all want to be fixed now. We want to be perfect right now, and that's not the way it works. So recognize small wins. Mindy, in your event, do you have exercises that you talk about or guidelines or recommendations?
Yeah, well, each speaker brings their own perspective, and each speaker is a practitioner in his or her own right. So they're very, very generous in sharing how they work with clients and patients. But what I wanted to say to this viewer, what's her name?
I'm sorry, I've gone off of that screen.
Oh, okay.
I don't
what I wanted to say is that awareness is wonderful. It's the first step. But after awareness, we need to get curious. Curious about what we're hungry for. You know, what is it? And what is driving the pain that is so difficult to feel? Very often we eat to the point of feeling pain because that pain in itself is perhaps easier to feel than the pain of what we're trying to avoid. And that's where you need to find compassion for yourself and acceptance, compassion, and then comes forgiveness. There's no shame. And question, you know, get curious. What is it that you're hungry for? And I very often share this exercise with the clients that I'm blessed to work with. It's called the 4 Ds. So it's delay, distract, determine, and decide. So you have the urge to turn to food. And I ask that you delay, even if you set a timer on your phone for 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever works for you, where you are in the moment, and distract yourself. Reach out to a friend, go for a walk, take a shower, a bath. Again, what works for you, where you are. And then determine what's really going on. What are you feeling? What are you choosing not to feel? Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored, or stressed? And when you answer those questions, then you can, the fourth D, decide. Decide who you want to be. And if you decide that food is what you need right now, honor that. As Dr. Tom said, it's what you need right now. But that awareness is the bridge to get you to the other side.
Hi, Mindy. I think there might be an issue. Hello, everybody. This is Liam. I do the tech side of things.
Yes, hi, Liam. I think Dr. Tom froze on us.
Well, and he's gone. So while and there's the message that's just said that Dr. Tom lost his Wi-Fi, but he should be getting it back right now. And
There he is.
All right, I'm going to mute myself again. Dr. Tom, you're muted.
Sorry, everyone. That's the price of living in Costa Rica, in the jungle in Costa Rica. That sometimes that happens. But Mindy, you were talking about your 4 Ds.
Yes.
Did you go through all 4 of them?
I did, and I'm
Okay.
happy to repeat them for you if you want.
No, it's not necessary.
Okay.
I got it when you summarize. I heard the 4 of them, then you were doing the explanation. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. You know, one of the things I talk about is if you have a habit of doing seconds, that after you've eaten, you want some more. Wait 5 minutes. You're ready to get up and go get more, just wait 5 minutes. And then go get a second serving if you like. But that waiting 5 minutes, have a conversation who you're with at the table, or if you're eating alone, get up and do something, have a glass of water. But if you just wait a few minutes, you find often, I don't really need that second serving right now. One of my friends, Dr. Tom Salt, we're on the faculty of IFM together. Tom's first approach to weight loss, and with every one of his patients, as far as I know, is buy smaller dinner plates. And when you buy smaller dinner plates, you put less on the plate and then wait 5 minutes before you get a second serving. And, you know, you're taking these little conscious baby steps to help guide you into more of a response instead of reaction.
Yeah, and the key is staying conscious. You know, the key is staying connected to what's really going on in there, and that, unfortunately, that's the rub for so many people who are struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors, that they lose that ability to pause. You know, yes, a lot of it is habit, but a lot of it is so driven by the desire not to feel uncomfortable that that voice takes over.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, sometimes I just want a break.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on anymore. I need to calm down my brain. I'm on all day with my brain. You know, I read a lot of papers. I do a lot of interviews. Sometimes I'm just done. And when I'm done, years ago, I mean, I was a popcorn fiend. And and then the next day I'd say, you know, I'm done with popcorn. And my wife would laugh. This was my first wife, but this was many years ago. She just laughs, says, yeah, right. And then I'd do popcorn again, you know, sometime down the road. But now I've set myself up. So one of my wins is when I need a break and I want to eat something, I make sure there's always apples in the refrigerator, always. And there's always peanut butter or almond butter. And I will slice apples and put almond butter or peanut butter on them, and I eat that instead of a bowl of popcorn. You don't have to be perfect. You know, you are who you are. I mean, I have my little nuances, and, you know, I don't live life perfectly, but I don't sabotage myself as bad as I used to. That's a key.
Yeah, and you know, what's perfect? You know, perfect is a perception
That's right.
that's really not rooted in reality. And there's no such thing as the perfect diet. You know, perfect implies that everything is the same, and that's not true. And what's wonderful for my body might not work for yours. You know, and the beauty of functional medicine and functional medicine nutrition is that the emphasis is not so much on what you're eating, but what your body is doing with what you're eating.
That's right.
And that is just so very important to healing and recovery and understanding that there's a lot going on in the body that needs to be honored and addressed.
That's absolutely right. You know, and there's a question that came in here, and I just had to smile when this question came in. It's from Steph, and she says, how do family genetics play a part in anorexia and bulimia, anger and depression?
Okay, it's a great question. And the truth is, we're just learning about that now. And this is fascinating to me as somebody who lives a recovered life. Statistics point out that 60 to 85% of people with eating disorders, or of all eating disorders, have some sort of a genetic component. However, so brilliant researcher and a survivor herself of eating disorders named Cynthia Bullock, who is out of the University of North Carolina. And she has made studying this her life's work. And she says, yes, genetics might load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. So if there is a genetic component, you know, if my mother struggled with her relationship with food, then the messages she gave me are going to skew my relationship with food and how I view my behavior with food and my body. So it's really important to question that and see that there's a connection, but there's still a lot more we don't know.
Right. That's a really good answer, Mindy. And yes, genetics have a role to play, absolutely. But those genes do not determine what happens to you. Those genes say that you're vulnerable to having this happen to you. And the genes, it's not an on-off switch. It's like a dimmer switch. And the more the environment around the gene turns on, the more problems of activating that gene you're going to get. I'm going to share screen here for a moment so that I can show you something, because Steph, you've asked a really important question. And so I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, let me put it on the right mode. So when you talk, this is from the New England Journal of Medicine. And when you talk about obesity having a genetic component, and anxiety and depression, same concepts with anxiety and depression, there's no question that's true. This paper came out 10 years ago. And they talked about the gene, one of the most recognized genes for obesity and having too much fat is called the FTO gene. And people who carry one copy of that gene, because you get one from your mother and one from your father. And so you can have no FTO gene if your parents didn't give it to you, or you can have one from one parent, or you can have two. And if you carry one gene, a single copy, the risk of obesity is 30%. You're 30% more likely. Now, if you carry two genes, one from your mother, one from your father, it's 67%. Okay, so that's the genetic component, still not 100%, even though you've got both genes and you're extremely vulnerable. But given that about 1/6 of the population of Europe has both of these genes, homozygous means you've got both, one from your mother and one from your father. So this is an important concept to understand. That's what these authors are saying, because 1 out of every 6 people in Europe carries that particular gene. But friends, have an even more important effect on whether a person develops obesity or not. The authors observed that when 2 people perceive themselves to be friends, if one friend became obese during a given time period, the other friend's chances increased to 171%. If you have the two obesity genes, it's 67%. If your friend develops obesity, your risk is 171%. That's the emotional side of how, in the pyramid of health, how the emotions and the spirit can have a huge role to play. Among pairs of adult siblings, if one sibling became obese, the chance the other would become obese increased by 40%. The results of this study also indicate that obesity is clustered in communities. For example, the risk that a friend of an obese person would be obese is 20%. So it's our relationships that have so much to do with this, and the effect vanished only by the fourth degree of separation. Now, this is in the New England Journal of Medicine. And it's so, yes, genetics have a role to play. They do have a role to play, but they're a component. It means you're a little more vulnerable to this. It's what's turning that dimmer switch on. So if, in this example, if your friend develops obesity, your switch is turned way up bright to develop obesity, 171%. Mindy, do you want to comment on that?
No, it's a brilliant study, you know, and look, there's a whole science today, genomics, you know, genes need not be our destiny. We can have a say in the expression of our genes. And that's something that is paramount to every disease state.
Right, right. Dana says, congratulations to you and Marzi. So happy for you. Thank you, Dana. That's really nice. Thank you. Cheryl says, I overeat to numb my mental pain, but consciously aware it's hurting me. Then the guilt afterwards is horrible. Oh, I read that earlier. It showed up here again. And once again, congratulations to you for recognizing that. Without awareness, you can't make any new choices. So you've got to be aware first of what's going on. So that's an important first step.
Yeah, and I hope you register for the summit, because what you're feeling will definitely be addressed, and you'll get some root cause resolution and solutions.
Kat says, not only does the physical part of obesity run in families, so can perfection, shame, guilt, which is a huge part of this puzzle. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
That goes back to the dining room table, you know, that metaphor. It's story. It's the story that we were handed down. It's the story that we're attached to. It's the story that for so many of us defines us. And it's the story very often that we're afraid to detach from, because then the question is, who will I be without it? And that's exactly why it's so important to have support on this journey.
And when you consciously are working on responding instead of reacting, when you're consciously doing that, I promise you, who you will become is a person that you will be happier with. Yes. And you'll be more at peace with. Who knows who you're going to become? Who knows? But you know you're not happy with who that person is now and how you are reacting. So as you become a little more conscious, you do base hits, you watch a couple of the interviews here, and you say, well, you know, I'll try that one idea. Because every speaker goes for 30 minutes or an hour, whatever the length of time is, and they've got 5 ideas, 8 ideas, 10 ideas, you know, that might be great ideas, but you can't do all of that, you know, but there might be one thing that you pick up, just one thing. You know, I talk about this one thing quite often. I have a slide that I use in many of my talks. It's a picture of a marble stand, a circular marble stand with a glass dome on top. Inside the dome is Galileo's finger. And Galileo bequeathed that all of his inventions could be on display for all of posterity. And that's the Museum of Science in Florence, as long as they also display his finger. And there's a great book about it called Galileo's Finger. And I put that up there, and I talk to doctors on stage. You know, if it's a good symposium or a good conference with good speakers, My pen is flying, taking notes constantly. Look at this, read this book, order this article, try that supplement, do this for this patient, page after page after page. And you go back to work on Monday morning and there's no time to implement any of it. Any of it. You listen to summits and you hear idea after idea after idea after idea. And they're great ideas. You might even take some notes on the ideas. And there's no time to implement any of it. Any of it. So I came up with the idea that if there's one thing out of a weekend conference that I include in how I run my practice, how I work with my patients for the rest of my career, if there's one thing, that whole weekend and the thousands of dollars to go to that weekend was worthwhile. Because you have to pay for the airfare and the hotel and the registration for the event. You're out of the office, you're away from the family. And my first year in practice, I went to 26 conferences, my first year. I was gone more than I was home. But if there's just one thing, it was worth it. And that's why I put Galileo's finger up there, one finger. And the same is true with these summits. And I've never thought to talk about this in summits before, but it's the way to successfully do a summit. If you have, some summits are 5 days, some are 7, some are 9. You might have 15 speakers or more. And you're listening to all of these 4, 5, 6 ideas that come from a speaker, you're overwhelmed. What are you going to do? You can't do all of this. If you pick one thing from Mindy's event, just one that really resonates with you and you apply it, that event was worth your time and money, although it's free, but that event was worth it to go to for one thing that may change your life. And so that's the way that I recommend we all look at the summits that are now available, that you don't have to pick up all this stuff. You don't have to implement every great idea you hear and beat yourself up if you don't. If there's one thing you do, please consider yourself successful. When I did that, it didn't, for myself and going to conferences, it didn't stop my pages of notes, but it made me feel better about, oh yeah, I went to that conference 2 months. Oh, that's right. That's when that was great. Because there's one thing I implemented, just one thing. And I go back to my notes of all these conferences over the years. I'll go back and say, oh, I forgot all about that. I think I'm going to implement that one now, right? And so you go back and you can listen to the summits again. That's a way of doing summits. I really should talk about how to do a summit successfully when I'm interviewed for them, so that people don't feel this anxiety that they need to implement everything. It's not possible.
No, and that's why I ask every speaker to please share how the listeners can find them if what they've talked about resonated on a personal level. And I love what you said, Dr. Tom, because it can become so overwhelming when you're thinking about implementing change in your life. I kind of have a tagline. I talk about transformation. And what I've discovered and what I share with my clients is that transformation is less about what we do to change and more about what we let go of in an effort to be the change. For so many years in my recovery journey, I was doing recovery. I was going to my appointments. I was showing up. I had that intention to do everything right. The approval of my practitioner was very important to me. I didn't know what it meant to be recovered. And there was a huge difference. And for me, that meant letting go of those messages, letting go of the story that wasn't serving me, letting go of the behaviors that were becoming consequential to my health and my spirit and my soul and my most beloved family members. Letting go freed me. It wasn't what I did. It was what I let go of.
Way to go. Way to go. Transformation is enlightenment. Do you know what the definition of enlightenment is?
Tell me.
Lighten up. Lighten up.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I always say if we can just adopt, let go of what we need to let go of. Let go of the burden. Let go of the story that is not serving us well. Let go of the past that has no future. We create this lightness of being. When we're experiencing this lightness of being, our bodies become lighter. And that applies whether you are a person who is a restrictive eater or a person who is a compulsive overeater. I'm not talking about the size of your body. I'm talking about the size of your soul.
Yeah. We have two questions here. Doris asked, why does it seem to be so hard to lose weight on antidepressants?
Yeah, that I really can't answer. Perhaps you can, Dr. Tom.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. There's a couple, Doris. The first is antidepressants alter your neurotransmitters, your brain hormones. And they're trying to bring some kind of balance to your brain hormones, but they don't work. They certainly can be helpful and may be necessary during a particular time of life. They may be, but they don't balance your brain hormones. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when we're on antidepressants, and I don't have any statistics for you on this, but my clinical experience is people's relationship with food on antidepressants is not a response-oriented, but rather a reactive-oriented relationship with food. That they may eat more volume, they're not being conscious of what they're doing, they're not chewing as much. There's quite a bit to look at in that world of how come on antidepressants it's so hard to lose weight. Your metabolism may be slowed down. The antidepressants can also affect your thyroid. So that's the kind of scenario that really requires a functional medicine practitioner to be an investigator for you to figure out. It's a great question. Unfortunately, it's not a simple answer, but with a functional medicine approach, you should be able to find more information. I would suggest registering for Mindy's conference because it's all about your relationship with food. So that might be a beneficial place to start. Mindy, anything else you want to add to that one?
I really wanted to address the importance of the gut microbiome with respect to anxiety and cravings and our relationship with food. Dr. Tom spoke to that so beautifully in our conversation during the summit, which you can hear on the Encore weekend, or if you choose to purchase the summit. But one of my driving forces for bringing this summit to everybody, to the world, was to introduce that concept of, as I said before, physiology impacting psychology. And when our gut microbiome is so severely impacted as a result of, number one, stress, the stress that drives the eating disorder behavior, but not only restricting, binging, and certainly purging, the gut microbiome is essentially ravaged, and that is going to affect our psychology. So in essence, we're feeding our anxiety. And I think that is a really, really important piece. And I also think that the antidepressant loop is involved somehow. They say the gut is the second brain, and very often now conventional GI doctors are actually treating IBS with antidepressants. So this is something that really needs to be looked at deeply. I love your suggestion to use a functional medicine practitioner. I don't know enough about it to really make a statement on a platform like this, but I think this is something that really needs to be addressed.
You brought up a very important point that would be a component to answering Doris's question, and that is the microbiome, Doris. Rebuilding a healthy microbiome. Antidepressants alter the microbiome to a less healthy microbiome. So you want to put some attention on that. And that's a big comment to make because the person's going to say, well, how do I address the microbiome? And that's what you can hear in my interview with Mindy on the event. Now, my interview aired yesterday on day one. but it'll be available on the Encore weekend. So you can hear it then. And the link is there for you to register. So everyone, I'd suggest you do that. Let's see. There was one more. Kim had a question. Eating most food makes me hungry. Can this be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? The answer is yes. Peanut butter is one of the exceptions. It makes me not hungry. Okay, well that's, thank you for sharing that. I'm not quite sure, there's no question there, so thank you for sharing that. All right, everyone, it's been an hour. It goes so fast.
Yeah.
It just goes, it flies by. So thank you all so very much for being here today. Please register for Mindy's event. If you watch one day of it, that's going to be the day that's important for you, right? And hopefully you will see more of it, but you'll see the list of the speakers and the topics, and something may call out to you. And that's what you watch. Remember one thing, you don't have to take in everything. You might find one thing that you apply for the rest of your life because it resonates with you. Then this will have been a very successful event for you. Mindy, thank you so very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was wonderful, and so appreciate your contribution and your support of this unbelievably important topic.
Thank you so much. Okay, everyone, see you next week.